On one side, the unstoppable legions of Byzantine Empire. On the other, a desert army outnumbered, outmatched, and led by one man. This is the story of the general who rewrote the rules of war, Khalid ibn al Walid. In the vast, shifting sands of 7th century Arabia, a name emerged that would strike terror into the hearts of emperors and command the undying loyalty of warriors. Khalid bin Walid was not merely a soldier, he was a phenomenon of military science. In an era defined by brutal, face-to-face combat, he introduced a level of tactical sophistication that the world had never seen. Over the course of his life, he fought in over 100 battles against the most formidable empires of the day, the Byzantines and the Persians, and he emerged from every single one of them undefeated. Born into the aristocratic Banu Makhzum clan of the Quraysh, Khalid was part of a lineage responsible for the tribe's military affairs. From childhood, he was groomed for the saddle and the sword. He mastered the art of the hit-and-run desert charge and learned to read the terrain like a poet reads a manuscript. Ironically, his first major entry into the history books was as an adversary to the Muslims. At the Battle of Uhud, while the Meccan army was in retreat, Khalid noticed a small group of archers abandoning their post on a hill. In a moment of pure instinct, he led his cavalry in a sweeping flank maneuver, turning a near defeat into a stunning victory for the Meccans. This early moment established the hallmark of his career, an uncanny ability to spot a single mistake and exploit it with ruthless precision. However, the power of the message originating in Medina eventually reached Khalid's heart. In the year 627, he made the long journey across the desert to embrace Islam. Upon his arrival, the Prophet Muhammad bestowed upon him the title that would define his legacy, Saif Allah, the sword of Allah. Khalid did not just bring his sword to the faith, he brought a strategic mind that would allow the fledgling Muslim state to survive and eventually expand far beyond the borders of Arabia. His first major test as a Muslim commander came at the Battle of Mu'tah. Faced with a Byzantine army numbering in the tens of thousands, the Muslim vanguard found themselves heavily outnumbered. When the primary commanders fell, Khalid took the standard. He knew he could not win a head-on battle, so he engaged in a brilliant display of psychological warfare. He reorganized his ranks, switching the positions of his soldiers so that fresh faces appeared on the front lines the next morning. He ordered his cavalry to kick up massive clouds of dust behind the hills to simulate the arrival of reinforcement. The Romans, believing a massive new army had arrived, hesitated, allowing Khalid to execute a disciplined retreat that saved his men from certain destruction. When the caliphate began its expansion into Iraq and Syria, Khalid's legend grew. He became a master of maneuver warfare. At the Battle of Walaja, he faced the Persian Sassanids. He hid 2 cavalry units behind the hills, waiting until the Persians were fully engaged and exhausted. At the perfect moment, he signaled the ambush, performing a double envelopment, the pincer move, trapping the Persian army in a circle from which there was no escape. This maneuver is considered the holy grail of military tactics, one that few generals in history have ever pulled off successfully. Perhaps his most daring feat was the march across the Syrian desert. To reinforce the Muslim armies in the Levant, Khalid took his men through the waterless wilderness, a path so treacherous that even the Bedouins avoided it. He forced his camels to drink massive amounts of water and then used them as mobile reservoirs to keep his horses and men alive. He emerged from the desert where the Byzantines least expected him, striking like a thunderbolt and capturing city after city, including the ancient stronghold of Damascus. This momentum led to the definitive clash of the age, the Battle of Yarmouk. For 6 days on the banks of the Yarmouk River, 40,000 Muslims stood against a Byzantine force estimated at over 150,000. The heat was stifling, and the stakes were the survival of the caliphate. Khalid utilized his mobile guard, a specialized elite cavalry unit that he kept in reserve, to plug gaps in the line wherever the pressure was greatest. On the final day, he sensed the exhaustion of the Roman infantry. He unleashed his cavalry in a decisive strike that broke the Roman center, forcing the legions into the ravines behind them. The victory at Yarmouk effectively ended Byzantine rule in Syria and changed the religious and political landscape of the Middle East forever. Yet, at the absolute zenith of his career, when he was the most famous man in the world, Khalid bin Walid was tested in a way he never expected. The Caliph Umar, fearing that the people were starting to attribute their victories to Khalid rather than to God, issued an order to relieve him of his command. In an age where a general with such power would typically launch a coup, Khalid showed his true character. He accepted the decision with total humility, stating that he fought for the Lord of Umar, not for Umar himself. He spent his final years as a private citizen, far from the roar of the battlefield. As he lay on his deathbed in the city of Homs, Khalid looked upon his arms and legs, seeing that every inch of his skin was scarred by sword cuts, spear thrusts, and arrow wounds. He wept, not because he was afraid of death, but because he had hoped to die as a martyr on the field of battle. He lamented, "I die now in my bed like a camel dies." But his legacy was already sealed. Khalid ibn Walid died as he lived, the undefeated commander. He remains a symbol of the perfect fusion of faith, intellect, and courage, a man who never lost a battle and whose strategies are still studied by modern generals 14 centuries later. If you want part 2, then just comment below.